Hello, everyone, and welcome to QSMA's Career Panel Series. This is Jessica from QSMA's Family Support Department, and we're so glad to have you join us for tonight's second Career Panel Series. We've launched this new program to share career experiences, advice, and ideas with the entire SMA community. So a huge thank you to our presenting sponsor, Biogen, for generously supporting this series. And we appreciate all the questions we've received in advance of this webinar, and we're going to try to answer as many of these as we can throughout this next hour. You're also able to submit questions during the webinar using the chat box feature, and you can find that located on your GoToWebinar toolbar. Please note that all lines will remain muted during the webinar other than for the speakers. And if you have any additional questions after tonight's panel, you can always contact QSMA's Family Support Team at familysupport@qsma.org. And now we'd like to welcome our four panelists, Angela Rigglesworth, Stephen Verdelli, Sandy Spoonmore, and Doug McCullough. And Angela, I'm going to pass it off to you to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of the panel. I'm really excited just to talk to you about my teaching career. I feel like I've got feedback, so y'all let me know if I need to do something different. I hear like a squeaking sound. I have been a school teacher for 21 years, which is so crazy to say, and I feel like my webcam like highlights my gray hair that's poking through, because 21 years, I just can hardly believe it. I have taught third grade for most of my career. I graduated from Texas A&M in 1999 and immediately started working I worked as a substitute teacher because I graduated in the middle of this semester. So I graduated in December and I wasn't really comfortable starting mid-year with my own classroom. So I subbed for a semester, and then in the fall of 2000 started teaching third grade. I had a little bit of a break from third in the middle of my career and taught fourth grade. And now my life is changing again because I'm going to be a fifth grade teacher next year. And I have just kind of a quick experience that I thought I would introduce myself with, just to kind of let you know like how things kind of have happened for me. When I first started teaching, I didn't have an assistant. And I literally cried the first 6 weeks of being a teacher. It was so overwhelming. And so my principal was very generous and went to the district and asked the district for me to have an aide during the day. And so for the last 21 years, I've had an aide, which has been tremendous. And recently I applied to work at another school. And when I applied for the school, they were like, yes, absolutely. We're so excited to have you. Yes, of course, we have the budget for an aide. And then about 2 weeks after I got hired, they called and said that because of COVID and all of the budget constraints, that they were worried that they weren't going to have the money for an aide. And so my heart just sank, and I just like my vulnerability was just illuminated at that point, realizing that I can't do my job without someone that helps me physically. Luckily, I'm so happy that this call is happening now and not last Thursday, because I still didn't know. They called and said that the budget had been rearranged and they were going to be able to continue to provide me with an aide. So I didn't have to call the ADA office or anything fancy. I'm so thrilled and excited to be able to change schools for my fourth time and continue on with having assistants during the day. So I'm happy to talk more about that later, but I think I've babbled on long enough, and I just will turn it over to Stephen next.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. That was a really interesting anecdote. So my name is Stephen Verdelli. I live in New York City, and I'm a graphic designer for NBC Universal. You might know NBC Universal for NBC, the television channel. They also do Universal Studios and the theme parks and lots of television, movies, business. I'm a graphic designer on the corporate team, so I get to do a lot of stuff for the executives and for the employees at the company. I've been there now for about 3 years, the first 2 being in the office, and now being about a full year virtual since the pandemic started. I also went to college for graphic design. I went to St. John's University. From there, I did an internship with NBC, and that was sort of how I got into my job. I've been working since then. And yeah, I'm just excited to talk about what it's like to work, to live in the city, to have a full-time job, and what that's like. And next, I think we're going to Sandy.
Hey guys. Well, it's great to be on this panel. Thank you so much for having me be a part of it. I went to the best college in the state of Texas, Baylor University, Sikkim Bears, NCAA champions. Woohoo! Okay, I'll stop now. I am a sales director with Mary Kay Cosmetics. I have just celebrated my 22nd year with them. Prior to that, right after I graduated from Baylor, I worked for Texas Instruments and then moved on to EDS and then worked for Bank of America in the area of computer programming, and then was promoted into the HR field. And I did that not because I loved it, because I could do it. See, when I graduated from Baylor in 1987, the ADA didn't really exist. So I picked a area of expertise to get a job that I knew I couldn't get discriminated against. So I went to work without an assistant. I used a pencil to type on my computer. And, you know, I watched the ADA evolve, and just about the time it got good, I decided to leave and go work for myself. So again, I've been working for myself for the last 22 years, living every second of it, and am so glad that I could switch from being practical to doing what I'm passionate about. So that's me. I live in Texas, just north of Dallas. And Doug, it's time for you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight on this esteemed panel. Really appreciate the opportunity and flattered. Thanks so much to QRSMA and to Biogen for sponsoring this. I certainly think this webinar series is very important to highlight the capabilities and the tremendous accomplishments of various people with SMA and disabilities in general. I think is certainly and always something that's lagging a lot of times, is that people don't see good role models. So certainly you have some great role models here on the panel tonight. So real quick, my background is that I live in central New Jersey. I have type 3 SMA. I'm a little bit different probably than the other panelists, and I'm a somewhat strong SMA. I'm still type 3. I'm still ambulatory, but barely. I fall, on a regular basis, maybe 20, 30 times a year. So the difficulties that I have are like getting up from chairs, going upstairs, doing stuff like that. So I always feel a bit awkward on these types of panels or these types of discussions, because my sets of challenges are maybe different than others, and so I have different perspectives, and so probably that's why I'm on the panel, to provide some different perspectives, because we don't all have the same situations. But certainly I want to emphasize that everyone has their own sets of challenges, and you just have to work through that. I was involved with an event last year to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the ADA, and did a little reading on Ed Roberts, who was sort of the founder of the disability rights movement. And Ed was a teenager, very active, and then suddenly he came down with polio, and he went from being totally able-bodied to the next day and the rest of his life, the only thing he could move were 2 fingers on his one hand and his head. And so you just look at someone like that and be like, wow, this person led, started the whole disability rights movement and all that work. And I would encourage people to look him up on YouTube. There's several clips of him where he talks about just that people see, various types of disability and think that means you're less than or you can't accomplish things. And that's absolutely not the case. And he certainly proved that. So real quick, my job background, like I said, everyone has a different path, but I'll just real quick in case people are interested. I grew up on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania. And I got involved. My parents made me work at an early age, and even though I didn't appreciate it at the time, I think it was good to build that work ethic and the expectation that you were going to chip in however you could. Certainly there were a lot of physical things I couldn't do, but there were things I could do to help out. So early on started working. Then went to college to Virginia Tech in dairy science, was thinking of becoming a vet, then took an anatomy and physiology class and decided I wasn't going to become a vet. So, but then I did a research project and really liked sort of management, and then went on and got a master's degree at the University of Florida in dairy management. Then came back home to the home business. But in a family business, a lot of times, and it was challenging with my physical challenges, but even more so, just the family dynamic. I mean, it's always tough being in a family business. And so, I decided after a year and a half, my family and I decided it was probably best, made sense for me to move on and do something else. I had a younger brother that was coming home. So then my background in the dairy industry, I moved to Wisconsin, and I worked in the dairy industry in Wisconsin, mainly at the University of Wisconsin. Dairy science department on the staff there, taking research information out to the field, doing presentations and whatnot. Then decided, at a university, my career was somewhat limited with just a master's degree. So I decided I wanted to get back into a business setting. Wasn't getting the type of job opportunities I thought I should at that point. So the idea of business school came up. So I ended up going back to business school at Duke and got my MBA there. And then for the last 20 years, I worked for Johnson & Johnson in supply chain. And what supply chain means for those that don't understand it, the vaccine is certainly a great example of that. It's one thing to make a product, but it's another thing to actually get it distributed and where it needs to be. So supply chain is basically figuring out how much you need to make, then working with suppliers to get the materials, then working with the factories to get it made, then working with the distribution centers and trucking and transportation to get it there, and ultimately to get it to the customer. So that's a little bit of what I've done for the last 20 years now for Johnson & Johnson. So that's my basic background. I'll turn it back over to the moderator to start the questions.
Great, thank you so much. Hi everyone, this is Colleen McCarthy O'Toole with Cure SMA. And thank you so much to Sandy, Doug, Angela, and Stephen for sharing all of your journeys with us tonight. For the rest of tonight's session, we're going to go ahead and go over many of the questions that we've received in advance, as well as some of the ones that we'll receive here live tonight. So our first question tonight is, we've actually received so many different questions in advance about disclosing your disability in the interview process. Have you disclosed your disability in the interview process? If so, can you tell us about that and any information that you want to give on that? And if we just can go ahead and get started maybe with Angela, and we'll kind of go through from Stephen to Sandy to Doug.
Yes, I definitely disclose it, and I list in my resume my extracurricular activities of being a volunteer for different organizations that are very clearly disability driven. And in my cover letter, I tell a story of getting stuck in my wheelchair on a set of railroad tracks, and that's how I ended up becoming a teacher. Like I'm just very transparent about it, because I don't know, that's just my my opinion and my thought process of I want people to know ahead of time. From day one, I did that, and continuing, I'm at my 4th school, as I said, and I want them to know kind of what my situation is and what my needs are. It was interesting this go round because I interviewed via Zoom, and you can only see this part of me. I think it's kind of obvious that I have a disability with the way that I talk and move my body, but they couldn't see my wheelchair. And so I asked the principal if they wanted me to come in person, just to kind of see, what my needs were. And they did not, but that's definitely something that I'm pretty forthcoming about.
So when I interviewed with NBC, I brought it up prior to the interview, but I didn't mention it on the application. That said, in graphic design at least, and I'm sure in a lot of the fields that people are in, it's sort of customary to have a website and portfolio with pictures of yourself and things like that. So I had a feeling that they had seen my pictures and things like that going into it. And then what I usually like to do is just ask if the facility is accessible, if it's wheelchair accessible. I think that basically makes it clear that you're using a wheelchair and you need it to be accessible, and it sort of brings it into a practical context rather than just being like, by the way, I'm disabled and it's a thing. So it makes it sort of a dialogue when you put it that way. I think there is definitely reasons to let them know ahead of time. But I understand a lot of people worry about discrimination, and it's definitely something that still happens, more so in some fields than others for sure. But I've heard from a lot of my friends at SMA that during the pandemic, their interviews have been a lot better because they're over Zoom. And that's sort of a big question. Why is it that people are less judgmental and discriminating less? Zoom sort of makes it a more equal playing field in that regard. So hopefully Zoom interviews are something that's around to stay. But yeah, that's basically my experience.
Well, I kind of had a different experience because you have to remember I'm older, even though I don't look like it because I use Mary Kay, right? But okay, that was a joke, guys. But anyway, back when I was interviewing, a lot of it was face to face. I mean, you obviously did a resume, and I, like Angela, was very transparent about volunteering at MDA camp and the telethon and Johnny and Friends camps and things like that. But what I will tell you is that I believe that if you're very forthright about your disability, you can start showing them how you are a problem solver. Because a lot of the things that I would say to them would be how I would do my job in spite of my challenges. And that was always something I could tell was impressive to them. So instead of them having to come to me and say, well, what would you do in this situation? I would already be ahead of the game and say, well, you might wonder how I type on a computer. Well, I use a pencil and I use the eraser, and the eraser is my finger, kind of thing. So, I mean, I was showing them ahead of time that I can problem solve and make things work for me. And so I would encourage you to not hide behind your disability, but to go forward with it and show them what you can do.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with everyone as far as disclosing. One, I think it's difficult. I think that's probably a more difficult question for people that have invisible disabilities. But for those of us with SMA, you know, I think it's pretty difficult to hide, and it's pretty awkward if you don't disclose it and then you show up for the first day and all of a sudden, you know, you need you show up and they say, oh, we didn't realize this, and that can create an awkward situation. And I remember early in my career, I got the advice that in an interview to be yourself strongly. You know, that you know, don't try to tell them what you think they want to hear, or don't be someone that you're not, because that doesn't do them that's a disservice to them and to yourself. You know, if they say, well, you know, do you like, you know, making presentations in PowerPoint, and you really don't, but you say, oh, I love doing that, and then you get there and you have to do PowerPoint presentations, you're like, oh, I hate this job, and then they're like, well, we thought you loved it, so that's why we're having you do all this. So the point is that I think you want to be your authentic self, and if an employer, you want to know early on that if for some reason an employer isn't comfortable with that, then that's probably not the right place for you to be working at. And it can be discouraging if you have to go through multiple companies to find the right place to work that is a best fit for you. But it's really important to find that right fit. So I think you do want to be open and honest, and similar to Angela, I have it right on my resume, at the very top, saying that I'm a handicapped dairy farmer, and here are the positives that come out of that. A hard worker, problem solving, as Sandy says, and I think that we need to think of the mindset that disability is not a negative thing. And I mean, there's actually been no better time to be a disabled person looking for jobs. For example, right now in the US, there's actually a federal requirement for any company that is selling to the federal government. They need to strive to have 7% of their workforce be people with disabilities. So companies are actually scrambling right now to find qualified people with disabilities. And so it's something that sets you apart and a strength, and something not to be trying to hide, because it's just part of who you are. So every situation is different, but in general, I would encourage people to be their authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you all so much for that. This next question here, we can probably do an entire webinar just on this one question. We have received probably the most questions just about this one topic. The question is, how have you all managed accommodations in your workplace? What were some of the accommodations that you received? What type of accommodations did you ask for? Did you need? Did you get? If you got any denied? We want to go ahead and start with Angela.
Yeah, so as I stated earlier, I have an aide for half the day who helps me do the physical tasks of the job. And, those 6 weeks without anybody, the papers were piling up, the filing, the cutting things out, but, all the teacher things that I wasn't able to do physically, it was just awful. And so my district, as I said, paid for the assistant for half a day. And continues now that I'm in a different district and obviously moving schools. Those accommodations are funded differently based on where I've been. So in my prior district, my district was more centralized, and so it came from a big budget. Moving into, I moved into the Houston area, like in HISD, and so it's decentralized. So my actual school budget is what pays for my assistants. So it's just interesting where that funding comes from. So originally in my career, it was funded from like the ADA office, and now it's just from the individual campus, and I didn't have to file anything for the ADA. Other accommodations, I have a Hoyer lift that was paid for by my school that I can use during the day. The school nurse helps me go to the restroom, which is, obviously a blessing, although I have a teacher bladder, so I can go literally all day long. And that's a whole other, also another webinar that's probably not good. And then one of the greatest things about being a teacher is that I have 23 helpers in my classroom, or however many kids that is. That I work with little ones. They're 8, and so they're able to do things that I physically can't do, and I get to kindly boss them around because it's kind of my job. I don't have to go and find people around the building to help me do stuff because they're literally right there. So when my aide isn't available and when she goes home for the day, I have all of those little kids there to help me. Additionally, I have different technologies. I have a document camera that will literally show what it is that I'm writing right there on my lap, so I don't have to reach very far. Just because as I've gotten older, obviously my range of motion has become much more limited. I have SMA 2, so I really can't move my arms very much at all anymore. But yeah, I just, if you're a natural teacher, please don't take from this that everybody with SMA should become an educator, because I don't recommend that. But if teaching is in your nature and you enjoy working with children or young people, really having all of those assistants available to me all day has been just this wonderful part of my career.
As far as accommodations, similar to Angela, the big one is definitely having someone around to assist. I didn't ask for the company to provide someone, but rather just to give me permission to bring someone with me. I have home care nurses, and they come with me to the office all the time. It was more a matter of making sure that they had somewhere to sit, that they had the proper identification and credentials just to get into the building and things like that. And they've been super accommodating and really helpful with that. I think a lot of it too is when you're looking for jobs, the sort of bigger companies and government companies can tend to offer a lot more in terms of accommodations. And that's not to say that small businesses won't help out, but definitely there's different advantages to different industries and different kind of places. Just like Angela has a lot of students around that can help her. I work in a building with, I think, 12,000 people. So there's no shortage of people anywhere. It's one of the biggest, most crowded buildings I've ever been in. And I love that. It's great. There's people everywhere that can help with anything. There's never a door that's not open. Like it's constant people around, which makes it really convenient for us. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of asking for what you need, being upfront, being reasonable with what they can offer, and sort of trying to make it work. Almost always what's in your best interest is in their best interest for your employer. So usually when your incentives are aligned like that, it makes it easy, hopefully, to make it work. And sort of like Doug said, with applying, if you're somewhere and they're giving you a lot of pushback and they aren't sort of eager to give those accommodations, you can certainly fight for them, but that's also a bit of a sign that it might not be the best place to work. If they don't want you at your best, it's probably going to be a bit of an uncomfortable situation for a while.
Well, again, you have to remember that back when I kind of entered the workforce, it was in 1987. And so they did accommodate me in ways like making my desk area at the height that I needed it to be. I needed it to be like one level would be lower and the middle level they would have my computer to be higher and different things like that. And they were great about that. But the issue that I always had was the bathroom. And I would do all kinds of different things. Like when I worked for TI, they had an on-site nurse and they had her do it for a while. Well, then she was like, I'm tired of doing it. So then I found a friend that was willing to go down there to the same place that I did it with the nurse, and she did it. Well, then that embarrassed the nurse. So then she made up some crazy reason why I couldn't use those facilities to go to the bathroom. And then about that time, I moved and got promoted and moved to a different company, EDS, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be smart and talk about the bathroom in the beginning. Well, that wasn't the smartest idea I've ever had, because they were like, you're going to do what? What? And I already had a friend that worked there that was like, oh yeah, Cindy, I'll take you to the bathroom, no big deal. We'll go right after lunch, no problem. Well, they forbid it. They were like, no, you are not allowed to go to the bathroom while you're at work. So her and I would literally sneak 4 buildings over where nobody knew us and go, and she would take me to the bathroom in that building because they told us if we did it, they would fire us. So then I moved to Bank of America and I worked in the HR department and I was in charge of the HR department. So I made my own rule at that point that I would go to the bathroom whenever I wanted to go to the bathroom. So, you know, again, you have to remember that this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, definitely a different time. I didn't have an assistant or an aide that went with me because I was pretty mobile, and what I was doing was computer work, and I used my pencil and I was good. And if I needed something else, I would just ask a friend. I'm kind of like Steve. I would just ask somebody around. I always worked at big companies and there was always somebody around. You learned how to say please and thank you. And it's amazing how people respond to, hey, could you grab that book for me, please? Oh, thank you so much. That'll go miles and miles away, kind of thing. So that's kind of how I did it. But I never had issues with like my workspace being accommodated and things like that. It was always the touchy issues that people don't want to talk about.
Yeah, from my perspective, you know, I haven't had to ask for many accommodations as long as the building is ADA compliant. You know, I can usually get by. But in general, I would, you know, I have a couple perspectives on this. One is I would, you know, absolutely agree with what Steven said in that, you know, employers are happy to accommodate you or set you up for success. So we shouldn't think of these as accommodations. It's really tools that you need to do your job better. And as long as you're a good, you know, if you're a good performer, companies will bend over backwards to do whatever they need to do to set you up for success. You know, they're not against you. They want you to do a good job. That's why they're there. That's why you're there. And they're happy to you know, provide, you know, basic accommodations and do whatever they can to help you succeed. You know, and I mean, I think the key term is a reasonable accommodation. You know, so you can't ask for you know, something outlandish to say, you know, I need a hot tub to relax, you know, in the middle of the day because, you know, that makes me feel better. But you know, as long as it's something that helps you do your job better, then they'll be happy to do it. Another thing is I heard a speaker at a Disability in the Workplace conference, you know, question, well, what exactly does accommodation mean? You know, everyone needs different things, and you know, companies spend, you know, millions of dollars to put lights in the building, but blind people don't need lights. But we don't think of lights as being an accommodation. And they spend millions of dollars to put chairs in the building, but you know, people that use wheelchairs don't need chairs. So you know, just because you know you need, you know, something, you know, doesn't, you know, it's no different than, again, setting up an effective environment for you to work and do your best. And then the final thing I'll mention is it's impossible to always have, you know, be accessible, for situations be accessible. You know, as I mentioned, you know, some buildings, you know, the main buildings I always work in have been accessible, but sometimes, you know, I'll go to visit a supplier, you know, or a manufacturing facility and it won't be accessible. And so then you just need to, you know, figure out a way to work around it. Or a simple example is, you know, my division had an off-site meeting, and at the end of the day, they were all, you know, putting us on a bus to go across town to a nice restaurant. Well, the bus wasn't, you know, handicapped accessible. So they're like, well, how are we going to get Doug, up on the bus? So it's like, well, we're going to have to call a cab, to get Doug over there because he can't get on the bus. So I'm like, no, I don't. I think, a couple strong people here can just give me a hand and lift me up on the bus. And then it becomes this great team building experience, where it's like, hey, let's get Doug up on the bus, and everybody wants to jump in and figure out, how to do it, and people are happy to help. And like I said, it actually, a lot of, there's a lot of articles and research out there now that the companies with more people with disabilities actually have a better teamwork culture and team building culture, because everybody just is happy to chip in and help, and they sort of put their petty differences aside and they're working to make everyone a success. So again, you ask for accommodations or your tools to do your job better when you need them, but realize that there's going to be cases where it's just not possible really to have an accommodation. In that case, you just need to come up with a creative way and work as a team to figure out how to be successful.
Oh, great answer, great information from everyone. Thank you all so much for that. This next question, and if any of these questions don't relate to you, feel free, of course, to just say pass. But this next question is one we actually have received many times when talking about careers and schooling and everything. How do you cope with fatigue from working full time, if you're working 40 hours per week, or while you're working and having SMA? We want to start with Angela?
Yeah, so my husband, makes so much fun of me because I literally fall asleep, or I did, in front of the television every night, like snoring kind of situation. But I kept telling him, so do all of my peers. Like, it's not an SMA thing. Like, all teachers are exhausted at the end of the day. Y'all, like, the coffee consumption was real. Like, I really had to like boost myself several times during the day, but I would just fight it. Like, I faked it, I feel like. And then I definitely I started taking Spinraza in October of 18, and it was career changing, because I would come home and I would still have energy to do more of my job, which is required of teaching. Like, you don't leave it in the classroom. And so, like, my energy level was just remarkable. And I've since switched medicines. I'm taking a Risdi now, and whether or not that's for you or it's not, it has made a huge impact, because the drugs have definitely given me a lot of energy. And fatigue is very real. Prior to taking them, I have been known during my conference period to turn out the lights and lean back in my chair and take a little snooze. You have to do what you have to do. But I also really credit working as a teacher for keeping me as healthy as I am, because I did have to push through and really fight off that fatigue, as well as really having serious battles with little kid germs, because I'm right at snot and sneeze level. And so I have a really amazing immune system, which I'm just very, very grateful for. But those first couple of years were rough, getting used to it. So again, I don't want anyone to think that I'm suggesting that you have to take medicine in order to fight fatigue, but that is something that worked for me.
I think, so for me, I went directly from college to working full time. And I actually felt that working full time, sort of the 9 to 5 hours, was a lot less fatiguing than what I was doing prior to that in college, where your schedule is kind of all over the place. I used to work overnight sometimes, and then I'd have to be up early for classes, and it was really inconsistent. So for me, I found that getting on that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 sort of lifestyle, the routine helps with the fatigue a lot. And then the other thing I would say is that once you enter the workforce, unlike school or unlike really anything that you've done in your life up to that point, it doesn't really have an end date. You just kind of keep going with it. There's not generally big breaks or anything like that. You're just kind of maybe off for a couple weeks in the winter, a couple weeks for vacation, things like that. But it's not a sprint, it's a marathon kind of thing. So you have to make sure that you're not pushing yourself too hard where you're going to burn yourself out, because it's not going to let up. It's relentless. It's 200, 300 days a year that you're going to be doing it. And like I said, fortunately, I found sort of a schedule and a routine that I'm able to work with. I started Spinraza the same week that I started working, so I didn't have that experience of working without it, but it probably helped. I wouldn't doubt it. And yeah, just it's a matter of finding a routine that works for you and not pushing yourself to the point where you're gonna break. Just make sure you're at a level that you can do routinely and that it's not taking over your life every waking moment, that you're freaking out about not sleeping, not eating, things like that. Those needs, your sleep, your diet, all that needs to be addressed first. Then once that's taken care of, you can be sort of productive and have a good routine.
Well, you know, I don't remember back in the old days when I was working in companies having that issue. But what I will tell you is that once I did start my Spinraza treatments, I would notice things, and I was a sales director at that point in Mary Kay, so I wasn't working in a corporation at that point. But I do remember it was the SMA conference at Disneyland. And Angela, I don't know if you remember this, but we were out, we had left Disney, we had been at the conference, and then Whitney and I had gone to Disneyland, and it was really late. And we ran across Angela and her husband, and her and I were talking, and I said, you know, I cannot believe that I'm still functioning. When we were in Disney at the SMA conference a few years before that, I was worn out way before it was time to go to bed. And Angela was like, me too. So, you know, I think it just, I never noticed it when I was in corporate America, is what I call it. But I know it was there because after I left, and then once I started getting the treatments, I could feel the difference because I could go the whole day and then go have fun at night, and there wasn't a problem with that. So, but like Steve said, I would just pace yourself, know what you can do, know when you're going to hit that wall, and move forward from there. Like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, I would just add that this isn't just an issue for people with disabilities. There's a lot of emphasis these days on being healthy in the corporate world, and that you can't do your best work if you're not healthy. At Johnson & Johnson, we're the world's largest healthcare company, and our CEO says that he aspires for us to be the world's healthiest company. And so that, and as others have said, you need to take care of yourself first. You can't do your best work and great work if you're tired or run down. And so the expectation is, and people understand this, and like I said, whether it's SMA or another disability or something else entirely, whether or not you have young kids keeping you up late at night, or a baby, or you have other obligations. They at work they'll often use the airline rule, take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. So make sure you do what you need to do to take care of yourself. I mean, we actually have a division now that is selling, that's developing corporate health programs, to help, what they call the corporate athlete. If you're going to have a demanding job, working, not just 40, but sometimes 50, 60 hours a week in high stress environments. You can't do that, for an extended period of time, no matter how healthy you are, able-bodied. That's going to take a toll. So there's this tremendous emphasis now on health and taking care of yourself as an employee and treating it like a marathon, so you'll be there for the long haul. So again, don't be self-conscious about it or think, well, this is something unique that I have to deal with. It's a really big issue, and the mental side of it as well. Certainly, as I'm sure many of you have seen, with the pandemic, and there's all these concerns about mental well-being and how people are staying motivated and taking care of themselves mentally. So that's an equally as important part as well that needs to, you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself there and doing what you need to do there to be healthy and be productive.
Great answers, everyone. Thank you so much. This next one is, how have you all managed personal care attendants in the workplace? How have you managed their scheduling and just everything around your entire work schedule? I know we touched on this briefly already, but Angela, do you want to start?
I mean, I have been an assistant at school that the school actually provides. So I don't do a lot of scheduling during the day with my personal caregivers. So I have caregivers that come in the morning, or a caregiver that comes in the morning and helps me get ready for school. And then I'll have another one that meets me either at home or will pick me up from work, kind of depending upon the year of how I'm getting to and from work. And then, so they'll help me run errands and that sort of thing after school. And then someone that comes in at night. So I have a pretty full staff. I have 8 different people that work for me, different shifts. So it's not, I'm one of those people that I don't like having just one person or 2 people, because it's so limiting, and it can be rather debilitating when that person is out or sick. And I like to have a lot of people on my staff that can be kind of the backup crew if need be. And that has made itself extremely evident during COVID. And, I think we've all just recognized our vulnerabilities, especially during the pandemic, of who's going to be willing to come. My husband got COVID, and so we had to make figure out who was going to be willing to come and still get me up and ready for work and that sort of thing. So it was pretty serious. So for me, that what works best is having a lot of people working for me on staff to kind of alleviate some stresses that I have.
I would definitely double on that having more people is always better. I think right now I have 5 or 6, and I've definitely been in that 7, 8, 9 territory before. You can never have too many people, because for a lot of people, it's not sort of a long-term job. It's something they're going to do for a year or a few years if you're lucky. But there's always going to be people leaving and new people starting. As far as how I handle it in the workplace, my sort of stance on it has always just been that as long as they're going to let them in the building, I will take care of the rest. Like my team, my coworkers, and my supervisor, they're sort of familiar with some of them. Sometimes I bring in new people that they've never met, and they'll just be like, hey, and that's basically it. I don't really make it their business, and then they kind of keep themselves out of it, so I can handle it however I want. I make sure that everyone is respectful of the sensitivity of what we're talking about, because it's sort of an exciting business. There's a lot of people that want to take pictures and things like that, so I have to make sure everyone knows that they have to act professional and sort of low key. And it really works out for the most part, that as long as they're respectful of me and respectful of the workplace, that it never causes an issue to have an extra person with me.
Well, I never, can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Okay, well, I never had a PCA while I was working in the companies, because honestly, they probably would have had a stroke if I had done it back then, because they had no idea what to do with stuff. But, now I literally have someone with me from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, doing various tasks. Because remember, I'm self-employed, so I have to kind of have what I call a jack of all trades person. I've got to have that person that can get me up and looking cute in the morning, and then we go to Mary Kay mode and working, and then we might go to a caregiving situation to eat lunch and go to the bathroom, and then we're back at Mary Kay mode, and then you've got to take their schedules. You know, a lot of times I have college age women that work with me, and so you know, on Tuesday, Thursday it's Maddie, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday it's Elizabeth. So I mean, there's a lot of scheduling that I do around what I'm doing, but I've grown into that. And I think if I was encouraging you guys in any way, when I first started having what I would call an assistant, it was just, you know, a few hours a day, Monday through Friday. And then I would go, you know, this would be better if I could have this. And oh, wow, this would be cool if I could do this. And what I did is I designed my life and what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do with my assistants. And so now I have it designed to where my family can be my family and I can be me. And if I need to go do something, if I'm meeting my nieces for lunch, I can go do that. I can be Aunt Sandy. I can be a daughter going shopping for Mother's Day. I can do all that on my own. So so I've grown myself into that role, and that's the way it's worked for me. But it's not always been that way. I had to learn to do what I wanted to do with my life. Does that make sense, guys?
Absolutely. So I don't have any experience with personal care attendants, but that day's coming for me. So I certainly appreciate always learning and hearing from others that have a lot of experience with that. So back to you, Colleen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So this final question is a big one. Tonight, we have so many teenagers and so many different college students watching this webinar, as well as their parents. What do you have, or do you have any advice for any of these young adults and or their parents? Angela?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've, you know, kind of touched on the passion piece of it. Certainly, you're going to want to pick a career that you're passionate about. I think being realistic about your needs and abilities is something else. I, you know, certainly would never squash anyone's dreams. I don't know, to be an astronaut and live on Mars. But maybe think of ways that you can contribute to NASA while having a disability that is extremely limiting in your mobility. So, you know, be smart about the choices you make. Be wise with your money. I will tell you that we live in a system that is a disincentive program. So we are those of us that require quite a bit of care that is provided by the government have a serious mental block and fear of earning too much money that you're going to lose your benefits. And so we have just a society filled with overeducated and underemployed people with disabilities, and it's a and so that I think is another, you know, conversation that everybody can have, because it's up to us to make changes. so that piece of being careful with your money, but also being very wise and knowledgeable about the benefits that you do qualify for. I still, I teach, and obviously teachers don't make a great deal of money, but I do make a comfortable living, and I'm still able to qualify for state care, having worked for 21 years. So, there's a lot to consider when it comes to your finances and your care, that how it will be provided and can you still work. So you have to become an expert in that language of whatever state you live in. And so doing a lot of research and soliciting help to do that from people who are older and wiser, I would really encourage you to do that as well. And then lastly, I think that, as you're picking that thing that you're going to be most passionate about, sure that you're picking something where you are supported and have a system in place, whether it's in the workplace or at home, that you can be successful in your career. So you're going to need a lot of help along the way. I think you've kind of heard that conversation of help, really learning how to ask for help in a gracious and in a way that people want to continue to help you, because you're not in this world by yourself, and no one is. And so when you ask for help and you receive help in a way in which you can express gratitude, then people are going to want to keep helping you.
Alrighty, I would say when you think about what you want to do as a career, if you're in high school or college or younger or later, you have to think of it as sort of part of a bigger lifestyle that you're going to be planning. So if you want to be a vet or a graphic designer or a salesperson, like regardless of what job you want to go into, you also need to be thinking about, do I want to work from home or do I want to work in an office? Do I want to work for a big company? Do I want to work for myself? Things like that are just as important as sort of the subject matter of your job or the topic that you're working on. I found for myself that I had some other really exciting opportunities too around graduation, and I realized that what I really wanted was work hours that ended at 5 p.m. I wanted to be able to sort of be done and go home and not have to think about work. And that gives me time to work on other things that I'm excited about. And if you're passionate about something and you can't find sort of a way to incorporate that into something that makes you money, you can still have that passion. You can have hobbies. You can certainly have things outside of your career that are fulfilling and important to you. So that's, I would say, just think of it as sort of one piece in a bigger puzzle that's your lifestyle. It's only a fraction of it, and you want it to be as fulfilling and as comfortable as it can be, but it's certainly not everything.
You know, guys, I think, sorry, my clock is going off in the background, but I think that my biggest advice that I would give you, not only as a parent, but as someone who has SMA and is looking toward their future of college and beyond, is to learn and to be an advocate for yourself, because you're going to grow up and you're going to need to take care of your doctor's appointments, and you're going to need to fight for maybe that accommodation that they don't want you to have, or you're going to need to figure out that your clothes aren't comfortable unless they're put on a particular way. I mean, let me tell you, it is amazing what you take for granted and what you realize. And so the biggest thing I could say is to learn to be an advocate for yourself. I can remember sitting in my dad's lap when I was in the 11th grade, and I said, Dad, I've decided that I'm not going to college because I don't like to read books. And he said, okay, well, that's not happening, so get a different idea. And so I can remember my 12th grade computer teacher saying, Sandy, where are you going to college? And I was like, somewhere where I don't have to read a book. And she was like, oh, okay. So she kind of took me under her wing, and I had her as a mentor, and her and I started looking at colleges all over Texas and what to do. And she really pushed me to start being an advocate. And then my parents were like, wait a minute, I don't want you to go that far away. And so then they had to learn to let me be my advocate and step away. So you guys, I think that I've had the success that I've had over these 25, 20, 30, however many years it's been since I graduated, because I allowed people to teach me how to advocate for myself. So that's the biggest takeaway that I can do, because then you can be passionate about what you want to do in a career. You can be passionate about where you want to live. Who do you want to take care of you? When do you need them there? All those things you can know how to do. So become an advocate, and mom and dad, make them advocate and don't do it for them. Words from Sandy.
That's a tough act to follow. A couple of thoughts that I had, certainly as everyone said, about think about what your passion is, what you like to do, what's important to you. I think, think about that. Don't limit yourself just because you have a disability and think, well, I need to, have a computer job or be a programmer because, that's what I'm able to do. Think, and it's hard. I mean, there's no, one definition of success. It means something different to everyone. So figure out what's really important to you and what matters to you, and really take the time to think about that and figure that out. First, there's an article I saw a lot too long ago called "How Will You Measure Your Life?" by this person, a successful Harvard, professor that has all these talented students, but a lot of times they go into careers and things that they think they should do as opposed to what they really want to do. So think about what's really important to you first, and again, don't limit yourself because you have a SMA. First think about what you want to do and then try to figure out how you can actually make that happen. And that ties to the second thing I'm thinking of here. A term I've heard lately is called the tyranny of low expectations. And so often, society, thinks that, disability means less than, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that, or the related term is, maybe inspiration porn, where people, get excited because, wow, you're able to work with a disability. Well, why shouldn't, people be able to work? I mean, we've got, examples, certainly the four of us and all over the SMA community where people have very, rich, rewarding careers. And so don't let other people limit yourself, and just get out there every day and do the best you can, and good things end up happening. And then the final thing I'll say related to that is just role models. Look for somebody that's similar to yourself, and inevitably you see somebody that's in your same situation or worse, that's doing better than you, and like, well, if that ding dong can do it, I certainly can do that. And I'm involved at helping lead Johnson & Johnson's Employees with Disabilities group. We got started up a couple years ago. As I said, this has become a big thing, and companies are looking to have more employees with disabilities, and how can they be more accommodating. And we had a speaker last year that's blind, that's an attorney for Google, and he lives in central New Jersey and takes the train in by himself to New York each day, and gets there and like, well, how in the world does a blind man do a commute from New Jersey into New York City each day? But he has figured out a way to do it. So it's like, well, geez, if he can do that, I can certainly come figure out how to get past this little challenge that I have. And so look for role models and connect with people. I'm sure any of us on here are happy to help, and I'm certainly happy to help, whether it means looking at a resume, providing advice, or if you want to just talk about opportunities, I'm on LinkedIn, or my email is easy. It's just my name, Doug McCullough94@hotmail.com. Send me a note, and what you find is that most people won't do that extra effort. So I'm happy to give it, because I know most people won't actually follow through. They'll be like, well, that was nice, but I didn't get to it. So don't limit yourself, and really, look for role models and see what they're doing, and really get out there and enjoy your life, and push yourself to be the best you can be, or whatever success means to you. So I'll get off my soapbox and stop rambling now. But this is, I'm sure we could all talk about this for a long time. But thanks so much again, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was a fantastic way to close out our panel today. Hi, everyone. This is Sarah with CureSMA. Again, I want to give a huge thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for sharing your stories, your helpful insights, and all of your encouragement with everyone. A thank you as well to all of our attendees for joining us tonight. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with a survey link, and we would greatly appreciate any feedback that you have to share. And again, we're so thankful for the incredible support from our presenting sponsor, Biogen, for making the Career Panel webinar series possible. So we also wanted to mention to be sure to register and join us for our third career panel, which will be on Tuesday, May 18th. And you can also catch CureSMA's previous career panel back from March on our YouTube channel as well. So if there is anything else that we can do for you, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great night, everyone.